This is Douglas Montagna from Grand Valley State, and I'm talking to Walter DeLeeuw, who's going to tell us a little bit about his experiences growing up in Holland during World War II, and also about his experiences in the United States and the American Army in the late 50s and early 60s. Start by asking, talk a little bit about your early childhood, where you were born, a little bit about your family background.
Yes, Doc, I was born in the Netherlands, in the southern part of the Netherlands. The state is called North Brabant, and was born in 1934. Grew up during the war. As the war started, I was 5 years old, and still remember all the German troops coming in, all in one day. In fact, I came home from kindergarten and stood on one side of the street with a little paper model that I made for my mother. And it took me about 2 hours before I was able to cross the street. And of course, realizing all the damage that was done during the invasion, bridges were blown up, canals were blocked off, and so forth. And that's what I remember from the beginning of the war.
Do you remember any, because I know you're really young at the time, but any kind of sense of foreboding or concern before the war about circumstances in Europe, just kind of like a backdrop? Do you remember any of that?
No, I kind of was too young for that, I think, to remember that.
Okay.
I do remember my dad talking about, things being critical. The Germans are in war with just about all the countries in Europe. And we heard a little bit about the United States getting involved. But that was way later in the years, of course.
Okay. And how did the German occupation affect your life?
Well, the German occupation affected my life as far as going to school, because when the German soldiers came in, of course they took up all the schools. They used them as barracks. And for that reason we were kind of limited to where to go to school and when, sometimes 2 days a week, sometimes 3, and we had to go from one school to another sometimes, until maybe around 1941, when the Germans set up their own quarters to live in.
Do you remember, did it affect how your parents earned a livelihood in any kind of way?
Well, of course, my parents were hurt quite a bit by not being able to buy the things they needed, not being able to do the things they had to do. We were with a family of 11, so that took quite a bit of food and clothing and stuff. So it was quite hard for my parents. My father being away from home most of the time, because he was a captain on the river tugboat. And his journeys were sometimes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, up to 6 weeks. So my mother was all by herself, actually, to take care of the whole family.
Do you remember German troops interfering in your life on a day-to-day basis? Did they ever come into your house? Did they harass you in any kind of way? Did you have any contacts with them?
No, not really, until the last year of 1945. I must mention first that I had 2 brothers that were forced to go to Germany to work in the factories, as the German soldiers, of course, needed to be in the war. So that was one big worry for my parents, of course. Would they ever come back? And that was the most that affected us, really.
Okay. And did your brothers ever talk about their experiences working as forced labor in Germany?
Oh yes, they did, quite a bit. One of my brothers escaped twice from Germany. Made it all the way back to Holland, but then got picked up again. The second time they picked him up, but then he escaped in between 2 soldiers under fire. And we never saw him again until the war was over. My mother, of course, knew where he was, but nobody else did.
Again, you might have a hard time remembering this because you were so young, but Did you have a sense that the Germans were going to remain in control of Holland, or did you think that Holland would eventually be liberated?
Well, I think I was a little bit too young to realize what would happen, in years to come, except until the last few months in 1945, when we heard that the British were on the way to invade Europe, and then the Americans came, of course, invaded Europe, and from the day that they landed in Normandy, we actually knew that we were going to be free someday. So.
Did you, were they Allied planes, the American and British planes, did you see their planes flying over you? Did they bomb anywhere near you?
Oh, they flew over there constantly. They flew from England to Germany to bomb in Hanover, Berlin, Aachen, and all these places. So they actually had to fly right over my house. And then the Germans, in return, they had these V1s and V2s rockets. They were flown from Germany to England. And we heard them coming a long way because they made a lot of noise. And as long as they made the noise, we were okay. But when the noise stopped, we knew it was going to drop right in Holland someplace.
Because they misfired, or they misfired in some way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They created a big hole in the ground, and so.
Okay. And when the Allies were, pushing the Germans back, was there any fighting that happened near you that you can remember?
Oh yeah, tremendous fighting in my area, because I lived right near two bridges, canals, and of course the Germans had blown up the bridges and the canals and the locks where the water goes up and down. So when the Allied troops came in, they had to rebuild the bridges. It happened to be Polish soldiers, and every time they had the bridge just about done, the Germans backed up again and blew it up again. So it took 3 days or 4 days that we were sitting in a bunker about 6, 7 feet deep on the ground before we actually were freed from the Germans.
Was your area flooded when the?
No, there was no flooding, but there was a tremendous amount of damage by airplanes and bombs, tank fire, artillery fire. We were evacuated to a farm nearby because our house was directly in the area where the fire was going to be. And luckily that we did move out, because the house was completely demolished. So when we were on the ground there for about 3 or 4 days, we didn't know what was going to happen. Once in a while, one of us peeked out the hole from the bunker, my dad or the farmer that lived there. But all they could see was fire and smoke, and so there was nothing we could do, just sit there and wait.
But otherwise, you tried to carry on life as normal throughout the whole German occupation as best you could?
Yeah, pretty much so, except for my mother not being able to buy anything, not to make anything. We couldn't buy any eggs, no meat, hardly any bread. The only bread we could make sometimes is go over the field where the farmer just had mowed the wheat, and we picked up the leftover ears. And after we got done, so to call combining in a bag, we were able to bake 2 loaves of bread.
Do you remember being hungry during that time?
Oh yes, we were hungry, and we had no vitamin or anything, nothing to make up for.
So you felt weak and very weak?
Yeah, we had sores and boils and stuff like that. We were weak, but as a child, we were active enough, I guess, to overcome all that.
Was that real privation mostly in the last year of the war, or was it throughout much of the German
Mostly
occupation?
the last year.
Okay.
From 1940 to 43, 44.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty much a normal life for us. We went to school, like I say, 2 or 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
We played and we did just about anything we normally would do.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not easy.
Oh, no. Just, again, you may have been too young to remember this, or maybe this didn't affect your area, but do you remember any examples of the resistance to the Nazis, or people who collaborated with the
Yes,
Nazis
yes.
being an issue?
Yeah, the Dutch people had underground troops,
Mm-hmm.
and they communicated with the Allied troops. And,
Mm-hmm.
but there wasn't too much they could do. The force was overwhelming, of course, and
Mhm.
the few Dutch people that were underground working with the Allies, there wasn't much they could do than
Mhm.
doing a little spy work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then after the war ends, how long does it take for life to get back to normal, as best you can remember?
Well, actually, relatively quick.
Mm-hmm.
At first, of course, we couldn't go to school at all for about a month or two,
Mm-hmm.
where the Allied troops now would have to have a roof over their head and
Mm-hmm.
sleep somewhere. They took over the schools.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, we had plenty of food, you know. The Allied troops, they gave us bread and cheese and candy and all kinds of stuff, so that was great.
Oh, okay. And did the Allied army stay in your area for any amount of time?
Yeah, they stayed in there some quite a time because they still had to move up to the northern part of Holland.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the southern part of Holland, so the fighting was still going on, like
Mhm.
20 or 30 miles away
Oh,
from
sure.
us,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to the upper Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So where we were actually liberated November 5th, I believe it was. The northern part was liberated after December.
Oh, okay.
So it was still hectic
Mhm.
during all that
Oh,
time.
sure.
There were no Germans in our area anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
the troops, the Allied troops, went back and forth, you know. They would leave in the morning
Mm-hmm.
or in the evening sometimes to go fighting up north, come back to us.
Mm-hmm. And then after the war, did your life change in any kind of significant way? I mean, you still went to, how long did it take you to go back to school?
Like I say, about 2 or 3 months later,
Mm-hmm.
that we had back our own school back.
Mm-hmm.
So from there on, it went pretty much as normal.
Mm-hmm. And then what else did you do throughout your childhood? I mean, what else, as you became a teenager and started to grow up, and what were some of the things that happened in your life in the late 40s, early 50s?
Well, of course, we went to school, high school, and then
Mhm.
technical school. I graduated from a technical school in Holland,
Mm-hmm.
which is as much as a university here
Mm-hmm.
in engineering. And I worked several places there, mechanical engineering job,
Mm-hmm.
until I came over here.
Was it easy to make a living in Holland at that time, even with your
Oh, yes.
considerable skills?
Yes. Work was plentiful. I had a good job.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that I came over here, first of all, was I had an uncle here and an aunt.
Mm-hmm.
They came over right after the war, and they talked about the United States, how they live here, and that always stuck it in my back of the head. Someday I would like to go and see that, and the only way to do that was to apply for a visa to immigrate,
Mm-hmm.
which at the time was not too difficult, except for the fact that in Hungary they had this big, what do you call it, explosion there, and all the Hungarian people
Mm-hmm.
came here first.
Mm-hmm.
So my visa was pushed back about a year,
Mm-hmm.
and by that time I almost had decided not to go anymore, but then when the visa did come, I thought, well, I better go now and push through, find out.
Do you remember what it was about the United States that attracted you? Like, what did they have in the United States that they didn't have in Holland that was drawing you or made you want to
It wasn't
leave?
so much what we didn't have, but it's just curiosity. I was adventurous, I guess.
Okay.
I heard about everybody driving a car here or having two cars, and of course we never had a car before in Holland. All we had was a bicycle. One time when I was 19 or 20 or 21 or so, I did buy a small motorcycle, but that's about all we could afford. So it was more the adventurous type of deal that got me over here,
Had you watched American television growing up in the 50s before you came here?
No, not at all.
Or movies? Anything
Well,
like that?
yes, I must take that back. We did see movies from John Wayne and
Okay.
the other cowboys,
Mm-hmm.
and some war movies,
Mm-hmm.
During the time that the Germans were in Holland, we saw war movies too,
Mm-hmm.
but they were more German war movies than the American type.
Mhm.
The Germans always won,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the other movies, the Americans always won,
Mm-hmm. And so you finally, when do you finally arrive in the United States, and where do you go at first?
Well, I arrived in New York, and
Mhm.
from there I had to take a plane over to Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
My plane actually left Holland on one day, and we had to come back twice, I believe. The first time one engine quit, the second time the smoke came out of the
Was it
other
a propeller plane or jet?
engine. It was a power plane,
Yeah.
4 props.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we had to come back to, no, the first time we flew back to Holland, the second time we made it past Scotland, but we had to come back to Scotland again with a smoke engine.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason I arrived in New York a day and a half too late.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't speak any English. I landed in one airport and I had to go to the other one to continue on to Grand Rapids. Luckily I found Lufthansa was there,
Mm-hmm.
and that little bit of German I learned during the war helped me, to get back to where I had to be.
So you didn't learn English growing up?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't
Mhm.
learn English.
So you learned from that point on, you started learning
Right.
English.
Right.
Did you just pick it up, or did you take any classes or any formal training, or you just picked it up?
No, actually not. I concentrated a lot on television. I watched television,
Mhm.
and my uncle in Ravenna, he
Mhm.
helped me a lot.
Okay.
And I tried to read anything I could find, so I could learn to speak as well as write and read.
Do you remember there being anything particularly striking or interesting or different? Like, what would be some of your initial reactions to America? Do you remember any of those when you first got here?
Well, the initial reaction was I couldn't believe it was so big,
Mm-hmm.
that the distance between one house was so far.
Mm-hmm.
When I came to Ravenna, it was wintertime, 58, and a very strong winter too. So it was really hard to get from one place to another anyhow. But I just couldn't believe the distances
Mm-hmm.
and the different way of living, different type of living.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about any of those differences?
Well, more free than
Okay.
we were,
Mm-hmm.
more relaxed in one way.
Oh, okay.
So,
It's interesting now, people would say that maybe Europeans live in a more free way than we do today. Maybe
Yeah.
more relaxed than we are today.
well, afterwards, yes, I was thinking, well, now they live nice, better and
Mhm.
more relaxed in Europe, less worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
Here you constantly have to worry about a job,
Mhm.
about your health,
Mm-hmm.
health insurance and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Where in Holland this is pretty much taken care of, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, so it's kind of almost, sounds like it's almost reversed. And what did you do once you got to Ravenna, like in terms of jobs and?
well, the first 3 months I stayed right on the farm. My
Mhm.
uncle had a farm.
Oh, okay.
And of course, being wintertime, there wasn't anything to do there except milk and cows, which I didn't do.
Mhm.
I came from a city, so I didn't know anything about farming.
Mhm.
But anyhow, I helped, you know, doing the chores and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But when the winter broke a little bit, I wanted to go to town and find a job someplace. Well, everybody was laid off practically, my cousins and
Mhm.
nephews, and they thought, well, let's go anyway. So I did find a job the first day out. I worked at the Hartshore Marine actually.
Mhm.
They started digging the Hartshore Marine,
Mhm.
pulling the pilings out, putting new ones in. Even though with my lack of language, he hired me anyway.
Mhm.
The boss was Mr. Loff,
Mhm.
and he says, I need a good Dutchman, he says.
Mhm.
So that's how I got to be started here in the United States. When the job was done, it was the end of October or November or so. Of course, there was no other job. They didn't work in the wintertime.
Mhm.
And then the draft board here had called me, and being 24 and 25 was the limit for draft
Mhm.
age, they told me to report to the draft.
Did you have American citizenship yet?
No,
Okay.
no. Actually, you had to be here 5 years to be an American.
Mhm.
And even during my Army years, I still had to wait my 5 years.
Mhm.
I served in the Army 2.5 years without being a citizen.
Mhm. It still happens.
Yeah.
A lot of people fighting in Iraq right now aren't U.S. citizens. And then, so you ended up getting drafted, and were you worried about that? Was that something you welcomed? Do you remember how you felt about that?
Well, I wasn't really happy with it, but
Mhm.
since there was no job again,
Mhm.
I would have to go through the winter time probably to find another job.
Mhm.
And the fact that there was either that or going back to Holland and,
Mhm.
you know, being maybe disappointed if I had done that.
Mhm.
So I elected to go into the Army.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I could learn the language, you know,
Mhm.
and get better acquainted with the United States rules, regulations.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a lost time
Okay.
completely.
Do you remember what basic training was like what they put you through?
Well, basic training was okay, being young and strong and
Mhm.
athletic. I had no problem with it.
Okay.
Of course, discipline, I was used to discipline,
Mhm.
so there was no problem.
Okay. And then did you immediately get stationed in Europe?
Yes, I was transferred to Fort Dix.
Mhm.
Actually, we were to be going to Korea, and during the time I was in Fort Dix. No, I was supposed to go to California, then to Korea, and then something happened in Berlin, something with the wall in Berlin,
Mhm.
and they transferred our orders to go to Fort Dix and then to Germany. When we got there, we landed in Frankfurt, and we had to go directly to field duty,
Mhm.
way in the southern part of Germany by Czechoslovakia. So I lived in a tent there for about 6 weeks.
Mhm. Was there a sense at that time that the United States was soon going to be getting into a major war again? Did you expect to see combat, or
No,
not really?
No, not really,
Okay.
no. Things became quiet again in Berlin, and
Mhm.
there were no other wars going on.
Mhm.
Vietnam was not there yet,
Mhm.
Korea was already done.
Mhm.
So we had no anticipation to ever get into a war. So,
And what were your duties in the military? I mean, what were your responsibilities?
well, I was trained as a tank driver
Mhm.
and tank commander here. When I got to Germany, I came into an artillery outfit, 14th Artillery. We had 105 Howitzers. And of course, it was a little bit of retraining for me, even though it was a armored vehicle. I was able to drive that, and so. But otherwise, no, pretty much the same duty.
Do you remember what kind of tanks that you drove?
Here in the States, I drove M48.
Mm-hmm.
That was the World War II tank, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They used to make Korea. It was a 50-ton vehicle with a 90 millimeter gun and a 20 millimeter machine gun.
Do you remember how fast those could go?
Well, we went about 40 miles an hour, something like that.
And how were they? How maneuverable were they? Could they turn sharp?
Very, very good. They had power steering.
Mm-hmm.
You have two handles in there,
Mm-hmm.
and in order to go one way or the other, you stop the track on one side and let the other one pull you along.
Mm-hmm.
Backing up was a little bit tricky, but we always had someone in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the back and in the front. And the one in the front directed me which way to move the handle.
And how many people were in a tank crew?
We had four.
Four.
The driver, commander, machine gunner, and the loader.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that load the projectiles.
Mm-hmm. And your training, how much time would you spend in the tank, while you were on duty? Would you spend like 8 hours in the tank, or would you?
That varied, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we had a field duty that lasted like 3 days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty much around the clock duty.
Did you enjoy did you find it interesting and engaging?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. When I was a kid in Holland,
Mm-hmm.
those heavy tanks and vehicles and all, that was impressive and exciting for us. And I always thought, maybe someday I would like to drive one of those.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember, because what Germany had done to your country, harboring any ill will towards them when you were serving over there, or you'd gotten over that?
No, not really.
Okay. And do you remember the relationships between the U.S. troops and the Germans? Did you got along with them very well?
The U.S. troops and the Germans?
Yeah, when you were serving in Germany.
In Germany?
Yeah.
For the most, yes, they got along pretty good.
Okay.
Of course, when you live close to the barracks, like the Germans that lived close to where we were stationed,
Mm-hmm.
and the bars that we went to, they were not so happy
Mm-hmm.
because, military life is different a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we would get out of hand a little bit, but
Mm-hmm. So like bar fights and stuff like
Yeah,
that from
yeah.
time to time. Overall, how did you find life in the military? How was it pretty calm? Was there dissension or trouble between the troops? Did you generally get along with each other? Were people generally content with their service, or were they upset about things?
no, we had no problem at all.
Okay.
We got along with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and well, we did the best. We worked together, we played together,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of us, on weekends or 3-day passes, we would rent a car in Germany and took a 3-day weekend to Austria or to Italy or France,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes 3 or 4 guys together.
Mm-hmm. And in Europe, you're not driving the tank anymore. You're driving when the vehicle has a howitzer in it.
Yeah, Howardster, yes.
Okay.
Then I got into a headquarters company,
Mm-hmm.
and we were in the forward direction center called FDC.
Mm-hmm.
So I was then a chief driver, driving a captain or a lieutenant around.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand what forward direction is?
No.
No. We would go out behind the enemy lines, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and see where the enemies are, so that we could direct our artillery back here
Mm-hmm.
on where to land the projectiles.
Mhm.
So,
How close were you to Eastern Bloc or Soviet troops at this time?
well, actually, we went on maneuvers quite often right by Czechoslovakia,
Mhm.
and I was within 12 miles of the Russian zone.
Okay.
And at one time, we actually were in the Russian zone when I was driving the Jeep with
Mhm.
the captain around.
Mhm.
Oh, this is another story. Whenever we were on maneuvers and we created some damage, we had tanks or vehicles running over fields with small little trees.
Mhm.
Then later on, I had to go back with the captain, me as an interpreter, and talk to the farmers and see what kind of damage we had done. During one of our trips that I was with the captain, we got kind of lost.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, we wound up in Czechoslovakia. And the reason we knew is everything was a little strange, and people looked at us a little bit strange. So I decided to stop and ask someone, and they just walked away.
You're driving a Jeep?
Yeah.
A U.S. Army Jeep, so it's
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next, I saw a church, and the priest happened to be outside, and I thought, well, if anybody wants to talk, he probably should.
Mhm.
And he told us to turn around quickly and get back to Germany
Mhm.
because we crossed the border.
Mhm. And was there any sense that you might have a war with Russia at this point? Were you guys like ready or nervous or no?
No, we
Okay.
had no
No
idea.
sense.
No.
Okay. Okay. And so how long do you stay in Europe?
I arrived there in July 1959 and left in July 1961.
Okay.
2 years exactly.
Mhm.
On top of the 6 months I already did here for
Mhm.
training.
Mhm.
Now a normal tour of duty for LST is, for a draftee I mean, is 2 years exactly.
Mhm.
But for the fact that I got married in Germany and then had a baby on the way, I extended for 6 months.
Mhm.
And for the other reason is that when I came back here, I wouldn't have to do any reserve duty.
Mhm.
6 months of extra active duty was as much as 2 or 3 years reserve duty.
Mhm.
And that was the other reason.
Okay. So you got out. Do you remember thinking about staying in, or was that something you didn't want to
Well,
do?
that was not an option for me.
Oh.
Not being a citizen,
Okay.
we were not able to re-extend our duty more
Mhm.
than 6 months.
Mhm.
In other words, we could not re-up for 3 years or longer.
Okay. So you're discharged, you're married you have one kid at this point?
When we came back, I came back by boat,
Mhm.
and my wife came 6 weeks later, I think, by airplane.
Mhm.
We started a new life here. I had no job lined up, but within 3 weeks, I started working here in town
Mhm.
as a draftsman.
Mhm.
So right away, we had our own life, we rented a place to stay.
Mhm.
So little by little, we built it ourselves up.
Mhm.
Got a few promotions at the first place I worked, and then I went to another place,
Mhm.
Shawbox,
Mhm.
and I worked there for about 3 years until I got to Seal Power.
Do you remember during any of these years missing the military, missing being in the Army, or were you left, you're
Well,
glad you're done with it?
As a married man then, I had no time,
Mhm.
to do anything but take care of the
Right.
family.
Mhm.
The first few days, yes, I missed a little bit the other
Mhm.
routine of life.
Mhm.
My friends that I,
Mhm.
lived for 2 years with,
Mhm.
we all split up.
Mhm. Do you keep in touch with any of them?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I have 2 or 3 that I correspond with.
Oh, okay. And how long did it take you to get involved in any kind of veterans associations?
Well, I never really got involved with any veterans club or anything.
Okay. Mhm.
Although I was asked to join the veterans clubs here called At that time, I felt kind of not being qualified, not having served in a war or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the veterans had served in one or another war.
Mm-hmm.
But they kept asking me, you know, that doesn't matter, you served overseas and all that.
Mm-hmm. But you always had a sense that there's a difference in people who served and those who saw combat.
Right.
That was okay.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. That people would feel that way. And then when did you get into helping these people here with their models?
Well, let me see, that was not too long ago. I stopped here one time and I looked at the model boats here, and
Mhm.
I noticed that some of them needed some work done, and I talked to people here and say, well, would you be able to do that, you know, cleaning up this or fixing that? I said, sure. I built some models before for myself,
Mhm.
and I took one of them home and, you know, fixed it all up. After that, the next one came along, and so that's how I got involved here a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about regarding your experiences with war in Europe or with your military service that we haven't covered?
No, not really. I think I covered it pretty much.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think you had a lot of interesting things to say.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now for 36 minutes. Some interesting